How do we mark it? I want to hear from you. Of racism in your everyday life. And I want you to call in and talk to me about your personal experiences. You know, how will we ever know when Britain is a post-racial society? Will we ever? How do we mark it? I want to hear from you. Give me a call, 0345 6060 973. Do you think remaining racism or racist attitudes is a generational problem? Do you think education is working here, or do we still have a long way to go? As I said, give me a call, 0345 6060 973. Let's now go to Nels Abbey. He's the social commentator and author of the satirical book Think Like a White Man. Nels, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much.
Nels, I hope you've just heard me talk there, and I just wondered what's your point of view? At what point will we be able to confirm Britain as a post-racial society? And indeed, how do you discover that? What are the pointers? What are the markers that we can rate that?
Yeah, I think the stats tell one story, and the story tells another, and the story tells its own story in its own right. The experiences of ethnic minorities, the statistics of representation. If you take, for example, the last time I checked, black unemployment in this country actually ran at 3 times the rate of white unemployment in America, which we often point to as a deeply as a society with greater racism problems than we do. It currently runs, or normally runs, at double the rate of white unemployment. But in the grand, I think there's a bigger story here, because we're looking at the situation in which we've got really big breakthroughs in diversity at the top of politics. Breakthroughs that, if you asked anyone 10 years ago, they probably would have said it would be an absurd fantasy. But it's happened. We've got an Asian mayor of London, an Asian prime minister, an Asian first minister of Scotland, on one hand, and an Asian home secretary, amongst other things else too, and black people in high positions too. On one hand, that's a good thing, but on the other hand, it tells a different story, and it's a mixed bag. 2 of the people who just broke into high office via party machinery. One in Scotland, of course, was via the SNP as a total party, so there's some degree of representation there. Rishi Sunak was not elected by anybody; he was actually selected by his party, by the MPs in his party. So the proof in the pudding, in terms of actual real breakthroughs of diversity, will actually be to see how these leaders perform in general elections as opposed to just party elections. So it'll be interesting to see how the nation responds to it. Then secondly, also too, I think we should be a little bit observant about what something else is happening in Britain, in that sometimes when what we're seeing is an expansion in diversity at the top of the country in terms of actual politics or so, but sometimes, or progress in diversity at the top of politics, but sometimes this actual progress at the top of politics in terms of diversity actually leads to regression on the ground. And I can give you an example. I don't think that anybody would call our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, a diversity, somebody or lover of diversity, or somebody who's actually speak to almost any ethnic minority or so, they wouldn't highlight her as a friend of ethnic minorities whatsoever. And we're seeing this increasingly across the board, that sometimes in order for some people to break into high level politics, I certainly wouldn't say this is true of Rishi Sunak or of Humza himself, but some of them actually are going out their way to prove how effective they are with their jobs by being harsher on ethnic minorities and actually collaborating with and being a bit of a vessel for the very racism we hope that they'll be getting rid of.
Oh gosh, I think our Home Secretary would absolutely disagree with you on that. She says she's taking a tough stance on illegal immigration. So she would say that she's doing her job. And I think she would say that a lot of the abuse she's getting, that is an example of racism. I mean, could you sympathise with that view of hers at all? I mean, I do need to stick up for her on this show, because it's quite hard to accept that you are actually accusing our Home Secretary of being racist herself.
Yeah, but I think the proof's in the pudding also. I think that by this stage or so, the Home Secretary, I think that we should be quite alarmed at the behaviour and the language of the Home Secretary. I think that that's well discussed with the nation. But it's not only the case also. If we look broader or so, we look at what happened in the situation with, say, the Sewell report, which actually said that there is no racism, that there is that institution of racism, or there is no racism and other things in the country. It was, again, led by an ethnic minority man who was incentivized to do, who is actually now a member of the House of Lords as a result of that. And there's other work too, which I must point out to you. Tony Sewell does good work in the academic realm with Generating Genius, which is a charity that looks after or tries to help young boys and girls get everything they can achieve in life. But we've seen it across the board increasingly. It's a particular game that you can potentially play in order to go to high places. Now, I think, in fact, if I was to give you, from my perspective, I wouldn't describe it as a Scottish situation, because I'm not that familiar with what's going on in the SNP in Scotland, but in relation to say, Britain, or let's say what's going on across the United Kingdom as a broad level or so, yeah, absolutely. The fastest way to become prime ministerial material in this country is to pretty much play the racism game, or give out billions of pounds to underwrite people's salaries during a pandemic. And those are the only two ways possible that I'm familiar with. And I think one is what I would say the Rishi Sunak model, which is giving out billions or so and saving people during the pandemic. And the other is, of course, I would say Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, etc. So the actual terms of how post-racist or how post-racist society we are. So I'm not too sure how much or how great an indicator actual diversity at the top of politics actually is, because sometimes it actually buttresses the very racism that we will be hoping they'll be helping get rid of.
But can we just say, you just said that, it can lead to actual expansion of diversity at the top, can lead to a sort of increasing of aggression on the ground level. Is that an opinion, or you've got some kind of statistics or fact to talk about that?
No, it's not. The point I'm making is not that this hostility on the ground is actually just happening by nature. There might be a bit of a backlash also to diversity at the top of the nature, but I'm not worried about that. I'm really specifically speaking about the behaviour and the policies and the language of some of the very people who get to the very top. And sometimes they get there because of the...
No, I know. We've covered that point, Nels. I think we've covered that quite fully. Let's just try and talk about, why do you think that getting people to the top, why is that going to cause more sort of kickback lower down? I mean, I'm not saying it's not true, by the way, because I've done plenty of shows on racism, and... we've had many leaders, and Suella Braverman just said it there. Last week, she said she didn't think the Met was institutionally racist. But then I host calls. Yes, but we've done that point. I host calls here, and we get lots of people calling in with terrible examples of racism. Now, do you think there is a chance that there is a sort of kickback going on? Because I'm shocked. I'm shocked that I hear these instances when people call in and they talk about what's happening to them. I'm genuinely shocked that in this day and age, when there has been so much education, that we are still seeing such sort of open examples of it in society.
Yeah. I think so. In terms of, is there a backlash against the achievements of these people? And I can't say I've seen anything particular. I can't say I've seen anything like a backlash whatsoever. In fact, I don't want to go back down that route again or so. But
well, then, do you think there is still
a backlash? Please go ahead.
Do you think there is still hidden racism in society?
I don't think it's that even hidden. I think there's a continuity of racism that has taken place within Britain, regardless of who's at the top of the nation, And sometimes there might be an element of, because of who's at the top of the nation, because of who's at the top of the nation, as I explained previously. Because, look, racism has very, very interesting ways in which it manifests itself. If I really and truly wanted to, given my skills, given my background, given my experience, my exposure, my education or so, it wouldn't be the hardest job in the world for me to get in and play a particular role in Britain, as British society, get on the radio, pander to a particular type of feeling and everything else. And voila, not too long afterwards or so, I'm pretty much at the top of the country. It's not as hard as you might think. But the effect that has with people at the bottom of the country is that people with the normal day-to-day people, particularly for ethnic minorities, is that it can be quite alarming and quite threatening. But the idea in which, there's a breakthrough at the top of the hasn't been tested at national electoral politics at national level just yet. Neither Rishi Sunak nor Humza Yusuf has gone to the actual broader electorate just yet. We'll see what happens then. But the idea in which this leads to can be seen as some sort of signal of a post-racial nation I say it's
a bit early.
I would say it's an error. Yeah, I say it's an error.
We're not there yet.
It's an error right now.
No, I wasn't saying that we were there yet. I was trying to ask the question: how can we even decide when that moment has been arrived? But Nels, thank you so much. Social commentator and author of the satirical book Think Like a White Man. After this, we're going to be straight to calls. I want to hear from you. Will we ever be able to say Britain is a post-racial society when we still are hearing and seeing so much institutional racism? What are your experiences? What are your thoughts? Give me a call on 0345 60 60 973. I'm Emily Sheffield. This is LBC and it's 6:18.